You ever open your front door after a long day and find two grown men standing in your living room like they paid the mortgage? Khaki uniforms, steel toe boots, clipboards, the whole we mean business act. And your wife is sitting at the kitchen table watching them like she's letting a fish swallow the hook. That's exactly how it started for me. And for about 3 seconds, I was sure it was a prank or a movie shoot or something you only read about on a bad neighborhood forum. Then one of the men tapped my mantle like he was testing fruit at a grocery store and smiled at me like I was already beaten, and I knew very clearly that this was real and it was awful. I learned two things in that moment. One, this was not a real inspection. Two, these idiots had no idea who my wife actually was, which as it turned out was the best mistake they ever made. We live in Cedar Ridge, one of those suburbs where the grass looks airbrushed and the HOA treats a slightly too loud laugh like a zoning violation. You know the tight, perfect mailboxes, sidewalks that look like they were planned by a color palette neighbors who are friendly up to the point where they can use your misstep as a reason to judge your life. Our HOA wasn't the friendly potluck kind. It was the kind where the president walks around like she's mayor, judge, and executioner of exterior paint colors. Her name was Cynthia Vale Blazer. Pearl earrings, hair that never moved out of place, smile sharpened for maximum effect. She had the kind of sweetness that turned toxic the minute you disagreed with her. That Tuesday started like any other coffee, sunlight, sprinklers, ticking kids riding bikes. I walked outside and there it was, a bright red notice slapped across our front door like a scarlet letter. Fire hazard mandatory inspection, immediate compliance required. Big bold letters, a fake seal in the corner, someone's idea of official. I looked down the street and half the houses wore the same paper like a brand. I peeled ours off and my fingers stuck to the glue. Brooke read it once, then again, and set it down like she was handling something contaminated. "This isn't the county," she said. She didn't say more, but she glanced at the cul-de-sac where Cynthia's house sat like a throne room, and that told me everything I needed to know. Cynthia showed up 10 minutes later, clipboard in hand, smile in place, tapping her pen at each house like she'd choreographed the whole thing. Just a routine safety measure, she called, as if she were delivering good news. That single word, cooperate, did something to my blood pressure. She returned at noon with the same smile and 3 precise knocks on our door like a metronome for intimidation. She breezed right past me, scanned the room, and actually asked who put up the notice. She told me the HOA contracted a fire safety team. There have been concerns, she said. Concerns about what? Our smoke detectors work, I told her. Our wiring's fine. She tilted her head like I was arguing with gravity and said in that syrupy voice, non-compliance will result in daily penalties. It's all explained on the form. The next morning, 2 men in khaki started going door to door. No county patches, no ID, just tool belts and the kind of faux authority that only works when people are scared. I watched from the porch as they marched into Tom Miller's place. Tom's the kind of man who roars more than he whispers, and 15 minutes later he signed a paper with his wife, holding their baby like a shield. When Tom passed by later, his voice was low. "500 a day if we don't comply," he muttered. Trucks rolled in. Work lights popped up like a construction zone. Drills started eating through the morning. Cynthia set up a folding table by the cul-de-sac with forms and a cash box, and neighbors queued up like it was ticket day. I felt my fists clench, but Brooke touched my arm and said softly, "Not yet. Let her talk." That's when she told me like she'd been saving the truth for a punchline, that she didn't get rattled by uniforms because she was a county fire captain. She runs inspections. She writes the actual citations. She knows what real paperwork looks like. I blinked. Why hadn't she said anything? Most days it doesn't matter, she shrugged. Today it does. And she added something that made the tightness in my stomach go from fear to something like sharp focus, impersonating authority. Isn't an HOA issue, it's criminal. We didn't sleep much that night, not because we were afraid of what they might do while we slept, but because we were planning. We rewound the doorbell footage, pulled the fake notice from the trash, compared it to real county forms, and set up 2 little cameras that covered the entryway. Brooke dragged out her official inspection binder and started ticking boxes like she was teaching a class. "We need them on record," she said. "We need Cynthia on record." I swallowed and nodded, because the plan made sense, and because the other option, doing nothing, felt like giving up a piece of my dignity. When Cynthia came back with the khaki guys, she didn't bother with pleasantries. Inspection time, she announced, and stepped forward like she owned our hallway. I stood in the doorway. Do you have permits? I asked. The question made her smile crack a little. This is HOA business, she said. Brooke stepped into view with a badge clipped where it could be seen, and I swear for a brief, glorious second, Cynthia's perfectly practiced smile faltered. Brooke asked for license numbers, county orders, anything that validated an inspection. Cynthia recovered with the speed of a practiced liar and said she'd return when we were ready to cooperate. That afternoon, the HOA sent out an email blast. Non-compliant residents fire safety violation. Daily fines imposed, our house highlighted like we'd become public enemy number one. Neighbors peered through blinds. Some avoided me in the mailbox. Tom texted, "She's saying your house is unsafe and you're endangering the block." The idea that my existence endangered anybody felt absurd, but fear is a powerful currency, and Cynthia was minting change. Over the next 2 days, people came to our back door like a quiet support group. Mrs. Park with her shaky hands and a folder of receipts. I already paid them. Miguel, the single dad, with a contract stamped with a fake seal. Story after story. Sudden claims of black mold in basements, threats of daily fines, contractors billing without tests, and Cynthia collecting checks with the smile of a fundraiser. That's when Brooke decided we weren't just defending ourselves, we were going to end it. She picked Friday because Cynthia loved end-of-week pressure. People are tired. They want things to go away. They sign checks to buy peace. We played tired. I emailed the HOA account saying we were ready to comply and asked them to send the contractors. Within the hour, Cynthia replied like a shark, smelling blood. She arrived with a third man who carried himself like the expert, and she strode into our living room and flipped papers like she already had the deal in hand. "Given your delay, your compliance fee has increased," she announced. "A $5,000 deposit will cover initial remediation." She pushed the contract toward me. The fake seal looked like something printed off a template. I kept the face of someone ready to be extorted and asked, "Can I just see your authorization?" Brooke leaned forward, badge catching the light, and then the thing happened that Cynthia hadn't planned on. We had witnesses. Brooke slid a folder across the table: county code on impersonation of public safety officials, real county inspection forms, recorded statements from homeowners about threats and demands, and the contract Cynthia had tried to make us sign. One of the khaki men shifted like a man who suddenly realized he was standing on a stage in a play he never auditioned for. Then the back door opened and the room lost a few degrees. Tom Miller walked in, pale and determined. Mrs. Park followed, clutching receipts. Miguel came in jaw tight. Behind them were 2 county deputies in the county fire marshal uniform, crisp face unreadable. Cynthia's words, always so well prepared, failed to arrive on time. The fire marshal looked at her and read the list: fraudulent notices, unauthorized inspections, financial extortion, unauthorized entry. Cynthia tried to laugh it off. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, and then the most satisfying sound in my life so far filled the room, the metallic click of handcuffs. Watching her being led out past the same neighbors she'd been terrorizing for years felt not like fireworks, but like something subtler and truer. Justice can be a quiet thing, a neighborhood standing up. The HOA didn't become perfect overnight. It got messy. People were embarrassed. Some were angry at Brooke for making it public. And yes, we heard the whispers. Why didn't they handle it privately? Was this public shaming necessary? Those questions are worth asking because they show you where the real problem lives, in the silence that lets bullies grow. In the weeks that followed, the board dissolved, lawsuits started, refunds were processed, and people began to talk to each other like humans again, not suspects. Tom taught Miguel how to fix a fence post. Mrs. Park waved with a real smile that didn't feel like a performance. One evening, I stood on the porch, and Brooke leaned against the doorframe beside me. "You know what the real hazard was?" she said. I looked where she nodded toward the street. "Silence," she said. "Silence is how people like Cynthia spread." Here's the thing. I want you to think about the moral didn't arrive with handcuffs or a headline. It came later in the quiet, when neighbors who had been strangers started comparing notes and realized they'd been paying for fear It was small and bitter and hard-earned if you tolerate small abuses because they're easier than confrontation. You feed a beast that grows. Power doesn't always look like a badge. Sometimes it looks like a pleasant woman with a clipboard and an excellent poker face. The lesson, the ugly, unavoidable one, is that civility without courage is just consent in disguise. Justice for us looked like people stepping out of their houses to testify, like the county showing up with evidence, like Cynthia walking away in cuffs past the same porches she'd lorded over. It was satisfying because it was fair and because nobody got to pretend it was an accident. The question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to know, is this: who was more wrong here? The woman who weaponized authority and forged a town's fear for her own gain, or the neighbors who kept feeding that hunger because it was easier than the awkwardness of confrontation? If you were on our street when the first red notice hit your door, would you have spoken up, or would you have paid to make it go away? Tell me what you think. Is fair? Share your story. Argue with me, call me naive, call me a hero. I don't care. But tell me, have you ever met an HOA power trip that felt like the law itself? Drop it in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear that silence helps bullies. And if you've got a story about a Karen with a clipboard, tell it. Because the fastest way to stop fake authority is to drag it into the light and make it explain itself.